Just watched the trailer for the new movie Warfare. Could this be the new Black Hawk Down, or is director Ray Mendoza going to give us something entirely different?
OP1, they are en route to you.
3 minutes out! 3 minutes!
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a deep dive into the trailer for the movie Warfare. I haven't seen the movie yet, it's only been out for a couple of days now, but this is from director Ray Mendoza, who is a prior Navy veteran and Navy SEAL, and Alex Garland, Civil War director. They came together and came up with this movie that is basically the memories and recollections of the Navy SEALs that were on this specific mission in the wake of the second Battle of Ramadi during November of 2006. Now, before we get into the plot of this movie, this just takes me back. Watching this trailer takes me back to my days as a squad leader in the Marine Corps when we served in Fallujah during Operation Phantom Fury in 2004. This was a couple years before the second Battle of Ramadi and where this trailer takes place. But it reminds me of the type of setting. This urban warfare is what is depicted in this movie. It's basically the exact same thing we were doing in Fallujah. Fallujah and Ramadi were almost like twin cities back then. Except in Fallujah, we conducted a major urban assault that kicked out all of the insurgents or killed them all and Zarqawi's guys. But then what happened and what that led to was the empowerment of the insurgents in Ramadi and the conflict there. And in this movie, what you see is the Navy SEALs who are basically holding firm in a building, now getting surrounded by insurgents. Unlike Fallujah, where they knew we were there and we were coming and they were fighting us and hunkering down, in this movie, what you see is a very active insurgency in the city of Ramadi. In Warfare, it seems like you have a Navy SEAL unit that is conducting a reconnaissance mission from this multi-story building. And they may have a sister SEAL unit that is adjacent to them somewhere nearby. But they're conducting some kind of reconnaissance, and they seem to be compromised.
Alpha 2, we might have guys starting to move in our position.
Upon their compromise, they understand that now they have insurgents gathering around them.
Copy, we're getting a buildup of activity here too.
Yeah, I definitely see.
And massing around them, surrounding them from all sides, but also from different levels of threats, from rooftops to windows to from the ground level.
Weapons at this point.
Yeah, we have all surrounding buildings. Trying to get to our position.
And now they find themselves in some kind of ambush that is getting ready to happen, and they find themselves reacting to this ambush. Like any good military movie, you have this unit that is now kind of in this intense firefight, calling for a QRF, or what we call a quick reaction force.
We'll let you know when we're inbound.
And we see that their higher up are now sending support assets to exfiltrate these guys out of the neighborhood before they start taking more casualties. But just like any good war movie, the cavalry that comes to save these guys also gets attacked and they have to turn around. And now these Navy SEALs are fending for themselves, trying to plan how to mitigate this ambush from the insurgents, but also get their guys out of there safely as they are already now taking casualties.
Who's the severely wounded? It's not you. It's me. Who is it? No, it's not you.
One of the things that I noticed right off the bat is just the aesthetic of these Navy SEAL operators. They look really young. They look like young soldiers, young Marines.
How's it going?
That's that new guy energy.
Kind of like myself back in 2004 during this time. That's what they look like. They don't necessarily look like Navy SEALs, although Navy SEAls are a lot younger when it comes to special operations units. These guys look like they're like fresh out of high school, maybe some college. They definitely don't look like Navy SEAL operators, especially with the ACUs that they're wearing, some of the tan camo, and just really overall their lack of facial hair, and their hair is within regs, almost like Army or conventional Marines. They don't necessarily look like long-haired, bearded guys like Navy SEALs usually do. One thing I don't typically like about movies that show the reticles for scopes is that they just show like a standard mil-dot reticle.
That's the fourth fucking time he's done that.
And if you guys know mil-dot, then it's usually something that is typically used on military service rifles, sniper systems, DMRs, or designated marksman rifles as well. As far as the rifle that he's using, this is a Mark 11 Mod 0, or otherwise known as an SR-25.
So you're peeking and probing.
Speaking with Sir.
This is a 7.62 by 5.1 NATO round.
Oh, he's back.
Designed by Eugene Stoner and Knights Armament specifically for the military. And it's also the predecessor to the M110 that came out after the SR-25, or basically the mil-spec version of the SR-25, as if the SR-25 wasn't good enough. But this combination of the SR-25 and this mil-dot reticle that they're using was pretty standard back then. But especially for urban warfare settings, this was a nail driver of a system. So it makes sense why these Navy SEALs have this. I myself didn't use the SR-25, but I used the SPR, which is basically the 5.56 version of the SR-25. I used it in Afghanistan. This was my primary gun that I would roll out of the wire with. But I also had my 10.5-inch Shorty M4 in my go bag, just in case, we had to do a little more close quarter combat type of application.
The buildup of activity.
Weapons at this point.
Yeah, we have.
If you're wondering why these insurgents are in plain clothes and not some kind of uniform, again, you have to remember this was 2006. This was the insurgency phase of the Iraq War. There was no more Republican Guard in green uniforms with their insignia on their shoulders. These were everyday men or prior service Iraqi Republican Guard that did serve in the invasion of Iraq, but then also post the invasion, they left the army, either went back to their everyday lives, or they took up and joined an insurgency. And in this case, the plain clothes that you see is really just kind of depicting the battlefield placement that was in Ramadi. This was Shia insurgents, this was Sunni insurgents who were already at war and at conflict with each other. In fact, what kicked off the second Battle of Ramadi was the death of a Sunni sheikh by Shia insurgents in Ramadi that then led to the alliance of Sunni tribes that then also retaliated against the Shia. So now you had kind of a Sunni versus Shia conflict that was going in Ramadi, as well as the U.S. presence there, and in this case, Navy SEALs. One thing that any kind of combat veteran can tell you is that in an urban warfare setting, when you have loud noises within close quarters, like a building, a room, especially grenades going off, but also just shooting out of windows, out of rooms to the outside, there's a lot of concussive force that is behind those sounds. A grenade going off in a room inside of a building is very concussive. If the shrapnel doesn't get you, just the concussive force of that grenade echoing against the walls back and forth can rattle your bones and knock you out. In this case, also, it's very disorienting because you have ringing in your ears, you have gunshots going off, you have people yelling. It's a very chaotic kind of atmosphere where there's a lot of confusion and you can't hear very well. So the communication's kind of out the door, even over the radios. And just, again, very disorienting because now you're trying to figure out between the loud noises, the ringing in your ears, the dusty rooms.
Profane. We're seeing activity converging to your north and south.
And the gunfire, where is all this coming from and how do we manage this? How do we gain control, establish security, and possibly get out of this? So it's very chaotic. If you could put yourself in this position, this is what these action scenes are kind of depicting, trying to put you in that moment where these guys are really kind of going through it and they have sensory overload, in this case, meaning that they just can't hear, can't see, can't communicate, can't function because of the application that they're in. Close quarters with loud noises and explosions going off. Now, one thing that I did enjoy seeing was that these Navy SEALs particularly were at a high ready when they were stacked on one another.
Let's move!
In the special operations world, we know that Navy SEALs like the low carry or the low ready position for CQB. I've seen Navy SEALs demo their CQB room clearing abilities myself firsthand, and they just favor low ready. So in this case, these guys are going high ready inside of a CQB environment, which is obviously favorable to me because in Special Forces, Green Berets like high ready. CQB is about the only place where high ready makes sense in urban warfare, but in urban warfare overall, as a general combat application, low ready makes sense in just about everything outside of stacking on a door or room clearing. When we talk about urban warfare, think about it as a 360 threat environment. That means that, the bad guys could be anywhere around you, in alleyways.
5 minutes over.
The scouts are gonna lead us out, and I'm bringing up the rear.
In first story, windows, doorways, second story, rooftop. So it's not just a 360 environment that's around you, but also high and low.
Back at our last known position.
And that's why when we're in an urban warfare kind of application, we have to use certain formations, certain ways of getting across what we call the near danger areas that are just merely streets or alleyways.
Romeo, we need defense.
But if you think about it, we need to get across this alleyway, across this street. So we have to use certain methods of getting ourselves across this.
Trying to get to our position.
And out of the open space where now we're a target in this 360 environment area. So as you watch this movie and you watch this trailer, you can see that these Navy SEALs are doing their best to cover down on all the different directions that a 360 environment in an urban warfare application presents you with, but also just to their best ability to get their guys out, getting their near and their far security put in place, looking down that street or alleyway. That way the main body or the main assault element can cross into the next building or wherever they're trying to get to. Another scary aspect of urban warfare are just IEDs. I remember in Fallujah, there were so many wires everywhere that we didn't know which wire was an electrical wire, which wire actually went into an IED. We definitely encountered several IEDs in Fallujah. In fact, I remember that one of our sister companies, Kilo Company, lost, I forget how many Marines, 14 Marines in an alleyway that was rigged with daisy-chained IEDs. So IEDs are definitely a threat. They're easy to conceal within the trash, within the rubble, on the wall. And if you can imagine wires just hanging everywhere, that is basically an urban warfare setting in Iraq, not knowing what could be an IED and what couldn't.
Eyes on me and only me. Has anyone looked at you? I'm fucked up.
In this scene, the actor Will Poulter says, "I'm fucked up." And what he is the message that he's trying to get across to the audience, I believe, is that there are many times in a firefight where you feel completely overwhelmed, sensory overload. Your brain can't function. You don't have a cognitive thought process that is optimized. It is in fact hindered by the loud noises, by what you see, by what you hear, and just the overall chaos of all the different moving parts.
Your north and south.
Wounded.
Trying to organize your elements so that you can understand where the enemy is, where they're coming from, try to predict or dictate their actions so that you have the upper hand. A lot of that can be mind-boggling and also just lead to people shutting down. So in this case, when the actor Will Poulter says, "I'm fucked up," he could mean that in the moment he is overwhelmed. He doesn't quite know what to do, how to decision make, how to exercise his cognitive thought in order to find solutions for the problems that are presenting themselves. But also mentally, he could be on the verge of shutting down. And I've seen this firsthand, as many combat vets have in the past, the guys just kind of shutting down in the moment and kind of snapping out of the situation. And now they're just kind of, it looks like almost like they're frozen. They have like that 1,000-yard stare, that deer in the headlight look. As we see here in this movie, there are civilians in this house. Now, these Navy SEALs could have taken this house from the civilians. But what we oftentimes encountered in Fallujah as Marines during Operation Phantom Fury was there were civilians still in Fallujah, even though we gave everybody 72 hours to evacuate Fallujah through the manned checkpoints that we had. There were still a lot of civilians left. And we learned that a lot of the insurgents took civilians as hostages and used them as human shields in the windows, in the doorways, oftentimes in rooms. As we enter a room, they would hide behind the civilians and use them so that we would shoot them first, and they would hopefully shoot us. But this was a common practice. So when we see these civilians in this trailer, it brings the question of, well, did these guys kind of just take over the house and force these civilians to stay in one room, or did they make a deal with them, or what's going on? But we also see them kind of protecting these civilians. So there's a lot to imply there. There's also a lot to assume, probably because it was probably the most advantageous house. Multi-stories, gave them the best views all around. And that's probably why they're in there in the first place. So So dragging a body in combat is very hard, guys. Like, I mean, you have to understand this is a 180 pound, 170, 190, 200 pound man, but he also has roughly about 100 pounds of gear on him with his weapon. And now you got to drag about 300 pounds to safety, to cover, or possibly all the way to a longer distance, putting you at risk, putting you out in the open at risk of obviously getting shot or injured. It's not an easy task. This is why in special operations, everybody tries to get a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger so that they can handle these type of situations. In the case of one of their buddies going down, we can quickly drag this guy to safety because we have the strength and the endurance to do so.
Profane. We're seeing activity converging to your north and south.
You know, if you're only about 170 pounds and you're trying to pull 300 pounds, the math doesn't math on that. And now you're struggling, also becoming a liability to yourself and to everybody else around you. Dragging somebody in combat is an essential task that needs to be executed with proficiency if both of these people want to survive. But in this case, we see them putting their injured on a litter and trying to carry them into the street. Now, each one of these four assaulters, or in this case, these Navy SEALs, have one hand tied to that litter, as their other hand is, has to do the fighting for them. That's a very hard situation to find yourself in, especially here in this movie where these guys look like they're outnumbered, overwhelmed, and outgunned by the insurgents. And it's going to be very interesting to see where that kind of that medevac evacuation scene leads to, especially since they're going from the building to the outside alleyway where all the bad guys are. So if I had to critique this movie, honestly, just on the trailer alone, the only thing I can really say that looked off to me is just the age and the overall aesthetic of these Navy SEALs. Again, they look very young. They look like young Marines, young Army guys, young Rangers. They don't necessarily look like the long-haired, bearded Navy SEALs and Green Berets that we're accustomed to when we see Special Forces and Navy SEALs in a certain country operating. But that is really it. Otherwise, from the trailer, the actions, the tactics, the protocols, some of the methods that they're executing, their overall body demeanor, the way they're handling their weapons, even some of their script has been very well done. And obviously, since you got Ray Mendoza, who's a prior Navy SEAL, he would also know the best advice to give to these young actors as they're taking these roles on, having to look like experienced operators, not just soldiers, conventional soldiers or Marines, but Navy SEALs that have been there and done that. It looks like to me from the trailer that these guys have it handled.
Going hot.
You gotta get ready, man. It's gonna hurt.
Overall, I would say that Warfare looks like a movie worth watching in the theater. I don't necessarily want to wait for this movie to go streaming to some platform. I want to go watch it in the theater just because of the action sequences. I want that full in-my-face kind of experience when it comes to the intense, chaotic world of urban warfare and how these Navy SEALs handle themselves in this storyline. So I would definitely recommend you guys go watch this movie. If you've already seen it, then leave your remarks down in the comment box. Let me know, did you like it? Was it everything that it was cracked up to be, everything that the trailer kind of hyped it up to be? Was it that, or did it kind of fall off? Did we watch the best of it in the trailer, and was the rest of the movie kind of dragging? What did you guys think? Was it a good story? Was it a good plot? How's the acting? How's the gunplay? How's their tactics overall? And is it actually worth watching in the movie theater? Me not having seen it yet, I would say yes, but for some of you guys that have seen it, maybe you'll change our minds. Let me know down in the comment box. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for tuning in, for watching this all the way to the end. Thank you for letting me bore you with some of my own war stories that are kind of relevant to this plot of this movie, Warfare. Urban warfare, again, is something that is pretty much the same in any country that you go to. You're in a concrete jungle trying to figure out how to get through this labyrinth with all your guys while fighting off the bad guys that could be popping up in really anywhere. It's the ultimate Hogan's Alley of warfare. And again, thanks for sticking around, guys, and we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.